I'm just going to pass over to Patrick to make a few brief concluding comments. Patrick's been a long-standing activist in socialist alternative and also been involved in Students for Palestine here in Sydney. So, yeah, Patrick, take over. But I really ask for people's forbearance and patience because there's still a little bit of the meeting going on. I also have some time for people who can actually ask some questions from the floor to Ahmed and myself.
Right, well, I don't think I've ever had as hard an axe to follow in my entire life. Because over the years, I've given a few talks about Palestine. And, I've always said, well, there's always been on our side, an overwhelming supply of heroism, of courage, of resistance, of people who are actually willing to get out there and fight and put their lives, their bodies, and everything they have on the lines for the cause of Palestine. And, you only have to look at the revolution sweeping the Arab world today and to see what it brings out in people. I think, the spirit that, Ahmed has brought to today, you see it reflected as well in all the people from Tahrir Square, in Bahrain, and the people who crossed over the Golan Heights from Syria on the May 15th, broke down those fences, some of them for the first time, to be able to enter Palestine. You see that kind of amazing spirit all the time in the struggles. And in these various talks I've given before, I've always made an argument that, as socialists do, that actually for the liberation of Palestine, that the road to Jerusalem leads through Cairo. I used to make it out this was a bit of, this is not just some little interesting geographic quirk or things like that. It's a political argument about that actually for the liberation of Palestine, while the things like the flotilla, while what we do here is an important aspect of that struggle, I think the working class of the Arab world, the people in Egypt, the people in the countries surrounding Israel, show the greatest force for what can actually liberate Palestine, to bring Israel to its knees. And the thing is, when I used to give this, talks about this in the past, some people would be convinced because, well, that seems like a pretty good argument, that seems like a great idea. But the thing that's been happening this year is that actually that road from Jerusalem to between Jerusalem and Cairo has had hundreds of thousands of people out on the streets marching on it. And it's not only been that road. It's been the road from Beirut, it's been the roads from Oman, it's been the roads from Damascus, from all over the region that have been marching, not just, in support of Palestine, but also to overthrow their own dictators, to fight against their own repressive forces, the commandos and everything else that gets sent in to put down their struggles for democracy. That actually this year we've seen the return of revolution to the Middle East. Something that we haven't seen in decades. I think it's just so inspiring to see that actually, really, liberation for Palestine, liberation for the people of all across the region really has never been closer. That actually, we saw on May 15, the demonstrations from all over the region trying to march into Palestine. Apparently this coming weekend, possibly the weekend after, no, this weekend there is planned for another round of demonstrations similar. And just like the Israelis met the Gaza Freedom Flotilla, what did they meet these demonstrations with? With bullets, with tank shells, with their special forces, with repression. But still people keep coming out and keep struggling. But then there's the question of, well, in Egypt, where to now? They've had Tahrir Square, and the struggle in Egypt now, I think, is really over the meaning of Tahrir Square. There are the people, the same, because really, the people who came to Tahrir Square, an amazing upheaval against the hated Mubarak. But then there are questions, people who think, well, we've had our Tahrir Square, and now we're all Egyptians, and that's what Tahrir Square meant, and that's why we should all go back to work. That's why we should allow the gains of the revolution, i.e., as Sylvia said, the ousting of Mubarak, but now the military in control, well, we should allow that to be the end. And there are the people who say, well, actually, Tahrir Square was not just about getting the military in power, it was about liberation from the entire oppressive apparatus of the military and the entire class structure of that society of the rich and the powerful that the military represents. There have been the people who said, well, Tahrir Square, it was about Egypt, it wasn't about international politics and everything else. I'm always reminded when I hear that of the Marrickville council meeting here, of shouldn't the local council be dealing with garbage and fences and things like that, not international politics. And I can make a quip about the state of Israel being garbage on the world stage. And, well, actually, the apartheid wall is referred to as a security fence. But actually, the same kind of argument as well, you shouldn't be dealing with these things. We should concentrate on Egypt. But actually, they ignore the fact that the lines drawn on the map are just that, lines on the map. Actually, they don't represent key divisions between people. Actually, the key divisions is between the rich and the powerful who don't want their business deals with Israel to be disrupted, and the ordinary people who can see the kind of common humanity we all have as ordinary people who suffer under the same horrible capitalist system. And you only have to see the way the Egyptian regime's been acting now if you look at a distinction between the way they treated the pro-Palestine demonstrations on May 15, where they, sent in the military, they shot people and broke up those demonstrations. But then you look at what they did when there was the attack on the Coptic Christians. Well, actually, it was the security forces who let the attacks happen and then attacked the Coptic demonstrations, standing up for their rights. The military regime would like to stir up more divisions. For all, they were probably complicit in orchestrating the attacks on the churches because they want to divide people to create chaos, to give the idea that, well, we've got to give power back to the rulers, not to the hands of ordinary people. But then in this struggle, well, there comes a role for organisations, for politics, for political argument, and these kind of arguments are being waged all across the Middle East right now in a way that was not possible under the various dictators. A couple of our comrades in Socialist Alternative were recently over in Egypt to attend a conference of the Revolutionary Socialists. These are people who, some of them, have spent the last couple of decades underground trying to build an organisation. They don't have the luxury that we do of having a centre in Newtown that we can advertise with posters, that we can put up on Facebook, that we can let everyone know about our meetings. These are people who could not even tell their own families that they were involved in this political activity. People all across the region have suffered, to try and keep revolutionary politics alive, and now now they're coming out, to try and argue for a way forward for the revolutions, for the liberation of Palestine, for the liberation of Egypt, for the liberation of the whole region. And what does saying all this mean for us here? Well, actually, I think it means that here, where we actually do have the luxury of having our own centre, where we can be out there much more vocally, well, I think it's our responsibility to actually get out there and do something. A couple of us last week were out at Max Brenner, one of the nice little chocolatierias. There's one down here in Newtown as well. Don't have chocolate there, because their profits go towards funding the kind of brutes who landed on the Mavi Marmara, who attack the Palestinians on a daily basis. Well, we were out there trying to let people know about this, to protest outside there. There were 50 odd of us there. We're going to be back there again on the 9th of June. You all have had leaflets for it on your chairs. Well, I think everyone should come along to those demonstrations. If people can manage to get to demonstrations under dictatorships to organise, surely we can find some way to get out of our other engagements and get out to the demonstration. I think the next time somebody says to me, oh geez, I'm a bit tired, I don't know if I'll come to the rally, I think I might just play them the clip of what Ahmed's been through, because really, we've got it pretty easy here. And we've got to be involved in the fight against our own little Mubaraks. The struggle, the revolutions in Egypt now talk about fighting the little Mubaraks, the managers, the bosses, the petty, hierarchies that oppress our lives day in and day out, not just in Egypt, but here as well. Because even though we live under the pretense of democracy, every workplace is still a dictatorship, where the rich and the powerful are the ones who actually call all the shots. It's like Ahmed said, well, actually, when you struggle for Palestine, you're struggling against the same people who cause the problems of the environment, who cause the problems of the economic crisis, who cause the wars. Here in Australia, they're the people who lock up, the refugees. We've had, Sylvia talk about the refugee camps, over in Lebanon. We've got our own horrible refugee camps here, where there are thousands of people who've committed no crime, who languish in those prisons, over 1,000 of them children, with no idea when they're going to get out. Well, actually, we want everyone to be involved in those struggles as well. And so, I'd kind of planned this to say, well, one of the videos that went up about the boycott actions. People have had this great tendency of taking footage and putting them to music and putting them up on YouTube so everyone knows about these boycott actions and thus can come to the next one. And one of them was put to a song by a hip-hop artist I quite like called Lupe Fiasco. And it's a song called Words I Never Said. And the chorus of this song goes, it's so loud inside my head with all the words that I should have said. I drown now in my regret, knowing that I can't take back the words I never said. And I like that lyric. Because actually, if you know what's happening in Palestine, if you know what's happening in Iraq and Afghanistan, if you know what's happening to the refugees, if you know what happens day in and day out when the bosses try and smash your unions, to drive down your working class living standards, when they try and put the cost of global warming on the working class, well actually, if you know these things, well you've got to get up there and say something. You've got to get out there and fight, and I think that means you've got to be a socialist and take up all of these demands, because actually, they're not all individual little things. They're all products of the same profit-driven, class-divided, competitive capitalist system that oppresses everyone across the whole length of this world. And actually there are people like us in meeting rooms across the entire world, including under these dictatorships, who will struggle day in and day out against the entire capitalist system. And I want you to actually join us in that struggle today to carry on a better world, not just for Palestine, not for just here, but for the working class of the world, that we can all unite and overthrow the capitalists and have a world that's actually fit to live in.